My daughter asked me to come over right away because she was worried about her mom getting involved with someone else, even though she couldn't see me very well on the video call. I found out that my wife was spending a lot of nights with a man called Donald Connolly, who is the mayor and has a big fancy car and sometimes takes limo rides. Stacy told me what he looks like and said she was scared about. I told her I'd try to get back as soon as I could. Stacy asked me to come home quickly, and she said she needed me to be discreet with her mom. I told her I'd do my best and that I loved her before we ended the call. My name's Robert Crawford. I'm 42 and I'm a design specialist for a big electronics company. I'm also a major in the National Guard, which is why I'm currently on a year-long assignment in Afghanistan. I've been on a long assignment in Afghanistan, where I serve on the command staff. I've been married to Kathy for 18 years, and we have a great 15-year-old daughter. My eldest daughter, Stacy, is 40 but looks even younger. She's the most beautiful woman I've ever known. She's 556 in terrific shape that actually improved after she gave birth to our daughter. She has dark brown hair down to her shoulders and warm brown eyes that always sparkle when she smiles. She smiles all the time. I could honestly say our marriage has been rock solid even when I've been deployed. We've had a great time together, and our relationship is really strong. We have a great sex life, and we're always satisfied. We've always been faithful to each other, and I never had any doubt about that. I filled out all the paperwork for 30 days of emergency leave, and then I caught a flight that took me 26 hours to get home. I got to my hometown airport on Friday night around 6 o'clock. On the 30th, I parked the car about half a block from my house. By the time November had set and the street lights had cast an ominous glow, the neighborhood lights were on. The living room, kitchen and upstairs master suite were all lit up. I observed my wife moving around the house, as though she was getting ready to go out. I called my daughter's cell phone and she answered after 3 rings. I reassured her and asked if her mother was going out. She confirmed that her mother had been in her room for over an hour, heard the shower and sensed her excitement for the night. Stacy expressed her dismay, wondering why her mother I advised against passing judgment until we knew the full story. Stacy asked about my plans and I mentioned that I intended to follow them and assess the situation before deciding how to respond. She urged caution and asked if I needed to change clothes. I declined, mentioning that my camel fatigues would suffice for the occasion. We exchanged expressions of love and I assured Stacy that we would always be together regardless of the circumstances. At 7, a black Mercedes rolled into my driveway and a tall, slender, a man got out of the car. I thought he was going to the door, but he was on his phone and the lights in the master suite went off. A minute later the door opened and my wife stepped onto the porch. She locked the door and walked towards her date, smiling. I felt like my heart was breaking when I saw her look back at the house to make sure Stacy wasn't watching. Then she shared a warm she gave him a kiss before he helped her into the car and they drove away. I managed to capture the moment on my cell phone. I followed them at a safe distance, and they drove through town and arrived at the recent hotel's parking lot. They parked a few spaces away, and I observed as they exited the car and entered the building, walking closely with arms around each other. I snapped another photo, revealing the evident long-term nature of their affair. From what I could see, they seemed really comfortable together. They were like a married couple on a date night. I waited until they went into the hotel before putting on my camo hat and sunglasses. I followed them inside but couldn't see them. I didn't mind. I got the usual smiles and thank yous for my service. I checked the information board listing current events. One thing caught my eye, the St. James Hospital charity ball on the 3rd floor. I could hear the live orchestra music filtering down to the lobby, even though I was on the elevator going up to the ballroom. I got off at the 3rd floor and followed the music to the ballroom, which I found easily. I passed the entrance and saw them inside, acting like the happy couple they portrayed. They were greeting friends and supporters. My wife briefly looked back at me, but she didn't seem to recognize me. I was still 10. 1,000 miles away, facing flies, sandstorms and the Taliban, I also noticed she wasn't wearing her wedding rings after passing the entrance. I went into the men's room, sat in a stall, and thought about what to do next. It was hard to understand what I had seen. I had been sure that my marriage with Kathy was as solid as any could be. I felt I was foolish to honor my duty in Afghanistan while my loving wife was at home dishonoring me and breaking our wedding vows. What was wrong with the people they were meeting? Didn't they realize the woman hanging on the mayor was married to an army officer serving overseas? Warm tears ran down my cheek, but I wiped them away. I had no time for self-pity. I had a plan to put into action right then. I needed to face a different kind of enemy than the Taliban. I stayed in the bathroom stall for half an hour, letting the celebrations continue. When I finally approached the ballroom door, only a few people noticed me as I moved slowly till I was in an area away from the bar and food tables, behind a pillar. I had a clear view of most of the room. I didn't have a ticket for the event, but my uniform was more important than any piece of paper. The young man taking tickets saluted me and said, "Welcome, sir," as I entered. I thought, it's a shame my wife and her lover don't show up. I got a bit of respect from people in the uniform I was wearing. It took me a few minutes to find Kathy and her date. They were dancing to a slow song. My wife's arms were around his neck, her head against his chest, and his hands were on her bottom. I took a few photos, but I had to fight the urge to rush onto the floor and deck the guy. I wanted to kick the guy in the groin, but that would only give me a little satisfaction and likely put me in jail. What I needed was proof of their affair. Then I would find an appropriate way to get revenge for their total disrespect of me, our daughter, and the U.S. Army. They danced another dance, then arm in arm. They made their way to their table, sharing a kiss and a few caresses before sitting down. I captured it all in photos, having seen enough for the moment. I made my way out to the hallway and found a seat where I could watch the ballroom doors and the elevators. As an Army officer, I had learned patience, and it paid off since another 2 hours went by before the event began to wind down. People started leaving the ballroom. My wife and the mayor were among them. They stood just outside the door talking for a minute. Then they smiled at each other and turned to the elevator bank on their left. Instead of pushing the down button, they chose the one that would take them up. It was strange. I was only about 15 feet from them. I was sitting on a bench against the wall, wearing my camel fatigues and sunglasses, with my name tag clearly displayed on the front of my uniform. I looked totally out of place amid the tuxedos and ball gowns. Many other couples noticed me and smiled or waved, but my wife and her lover were so tuned into each other that they never gave me a glance. I watched them enter the elevator holding hands. I saw their car stop on the 11th floor and I knew it wasn't going back up to the 3rd floor where there were more couples waiting. I went back to the registration desk and told the attendant that I had an urgent message for Mayor Connolly. I showed her my government ID and asked for his room number. She was a bit reluctant at first, but she eventually told me that he was in room 1114. I thanked her and took the elevator to the 11th floor. I found room 1114 after checking the hallway for other occupants. I pressed my ear against the door, but I could only hear soft conversation. I wasn't satisfied, so I proceeded down the hall and found the door to the stairs. I secured it with my handkerchief to prevent it from locking. Glancing at my watch, I noted it was midnight. Stacy had mentioned her mother usually came home between 2 and 3, and she'd even come home at 7 recently. I had to wait a while, but my Army training and patience paid off. I could see room 1114 through the window in the door, so I wouldn't miss them when they were done. While I waited, I tried to keep my mind on the task at hand, but I kept imagining her with a different lover. My heart was broken, but it went far beyond that. I felt like my life was spiraling down into a dark abyss, where only pain, rejection, and humiliation remained. I knew I had to stay strong for my daughter's sake, but the realization that the woman I loved more than anything else on earth, whom I trusted with every fiber of my being, was at that very moment giving her body and soul to another man overwhelmed me with a tidal wave of pain. It was around 1:30 I stepped out of the stairwell and pressed my ear against their door. I could hear faint sounds that resembled moaning. Then I distinctly heard my wife exclaiming, "Yes, oh God, yes, do me, Dawn. Do me hard like that, you're so good." She screamed a sound I had heard many times before during moments with me. With tears streaming down my cheeks, I returned to the stairwell, anticipating they would conclude soon and leave. I left the stairwell for the last time at 2, positioning myself against the wall outside their room to capture their exit on my cell phone's video. 15 minutes later, I heard the chain being removed and the door click open, so I started recording as they emerged. Donald had his arm protectively around Kathy, who was leaning against him and smiling. Kathy looked freshly scrubbed and well-groomed. While Donald calmly looked pleased with himself, the groom kissed his bride briefly, then turned towards the elevators. Kathy noticed me leaning against the wall. I asked her about her meeting with her lover, wondering how it went. When she saw me, Kathy seemed shocked, placing her hand on her heart and expressing disbelief. She fell to her knees, pleading that this wasn't supposed to happen. I wasn't meant to see her lover taking a moment to register the situation. He insisted that it wasn't what it seemed and that Kathy was merely assisting with his new campaign. I sarcastically remarked on the irony of such campaign tactics involving infidelity. I questioned the mayor's morality, highlighting the impact on my marriage while I was away serving the country. The mayor attempted to deny any closeness. He tried to get Kathy to back him up, but she wouldn't. She told him about what she'd seen and heard. I realized that my wife was now his and that he was trying to manipulate the situation. I was angry and called them both cowards. I told my daughter what was going on. The mayor was shocked and didn't know what to do. While my wife was on the floor crying, I told Kathy not to come home that night and suggested she spend it with her lover instead. I said I'd try to comfort our daughter and that on Monday I'd file for divorce. I also told the news media about the mayor's actions in running the city. I told Kathy to stay away until I got back from my 30-day emergency leave. After that, she took emergency leave, and then she could decide what to do next. Kathy asked me to forgive her for being unfaithful to me while I was away, and she asked me not to tell our daughter what had happened. I was confused about why she did what she did, but I knew that they had chosen each other. I left for the elevator as Kathy apologized, but I couldn't bring myself to accept her remorse. I observed their apparent happiness together and left them with a harsh farewell. When I arrived home, I found Stacy waiting for me, clearly upset. She embraced me tightly and expressed how much she had missed me. I told her I knew she was worried about her mom and that I'd found her mom and the mayor together. Stacy said she wasn't worried about her mom being away, because she felt neglected when she was. She asked to come with me when I went back to Afghanistan, but I said she needed to stay here. Stacy said she couldn't. Stacy said she wanted to stay with her mother, even though she felt resentful towards her. I reminded her that her mother was still her mother, but Stacy tearfully expressed her belief that her mother didn't love her. I gave her a hug and she cried in my arms. I finally convinced Stacy to go to bed and I made sure the house was secure, including setting the door chains. I didn't want to take any chances, so I slept on the couch even though I wasn't sure Kathy and her lover had used any of our bedrooms for their TRRS. I only slept in short bursts, 45 minutes here, half an hour there. My mind kept going back to how I'd figure out how to handle the situation when Kathy came to claim her clothes and personal items she'd need until I left in 30 days. I could have been a nice guy and taken a hotel room, leaving the house to her, but I just couldn't find it in my heart to be that nice. She was the one that destroyed our marriage, so she could at least suffer the minor inconvenience if she's going to be displaced from her home for a month, and I'm pretty sure her lover would be happy to put her up. They've been acting like a married couple, so why not live like one for a while? Call it a trial marriage. Stacy and I both slept until noon, or at least until around noon. I woke up first and made coffee, then made toast and scrambled eggs for us. We chatted while we were eating and then started to wash up and put the dishes in the dishwasher. Then the phone rang and Stacy and I looked at each other and then she answered it. She was talking to her mother and she seemed to think that her mother wasn't being completely honest with her. She also mentioned the affair she was having with Donald Connolly and said that it wasn't just a one-off thing. There was a time mix-up. Stacy said she was the one who told me to come back home. She said her mom was neglecting her and obsessed with her affair with Donald Connolly. Stacy said her mom had asked her not to hurt him. Stacy wouldn't do what I asked. She was really frustrated and disappointed after the call. Stacy said her mom didn't understand the situation. She was worried her mom didn't know how serious it was. I told Stacy that her mother's lack of understanding would become apparent as the situation unfolded. The rest of the day passed quietly, with us trying to distract ourselves from thoughts about Kathy and Mayor Connolly. We discussed Stacy's future plans with me, suggesting she stay in her current environment despite her concerns about her friend's reactions to her mother's actions. I told her that real friends would. She wasn't convinced, but we managed to sort things out with my mom. Hopefully, Stacy can stay with her until my deployment ends, which should be in another 5 or 6 months. The phone rang again later on. It was Kathy. I answered, but as soon as I heard Kathy say, "Bob, oh Bob, please give me a chance to explain," I passed the phone to Stacy. I didn't say anything. Stacy's mom was really quite cold and she held the phone away from her ear. Kathy insisted on speaking with Stacy's father despite Stacy's resistance. Stacy demanded an explanation for Kathy's actions over the past 6 months, accusing her of betraying their family. Kathy defended herself, claiming she didn't intend to hurt anyone, while Stacy continued to express her disappointment and anger throughout their conversation. Kathy could be heard crying. Stacy expressed her hurt and disappointment. She told her mother how much it hurt the family because of Kathy's actions. Kathy said she loved Stacy and her husband. Stacy wasn't sure she believed her. Kathy asked for some things she needed, like clothes and birth control pills. She was sorry and frustrated. Kathy was crying. Stacy joked that Kathy might get pregnant with the mayor's child. She then mentioned packing Kathy's belongings, including clothes and birth control pills, and hinted at Kathy's need for makeup to maintain her appearance as the town's social figure. Stacy concluded by stating that Kathy's belongings would be left at the curb for her to retrieve after ending the call. Stacy started crying, so I comforted her by wrapping my arms around her. I acknowledged that she had been tough on her mom, but I understood her anger. I told her we'd get through this together, then left to get the stuff her mom needed. I went back to my office to plan our next steps, using my military training to think carefully about what we needed to do. I saw this as a battle that needed careful planning and execution. The tasks I had to do were mostly straightforward. I'd hire a divorce lawyer, cancel our joint credit cards, and get separate credit. I'd get new cards for myself and Stacy, change the beneficiary on my life insurance and retirement plans to Stacy, and transfer half of the funds from our checking and savings accounts to new accounts accessible only by Stacy and me. Figuring out how to deal with Mayor Connolly was a bigger challenge. I thought he deserved punishment for his actions, and I wanted to make sure he was exposed as the cowardly wife-stealing individual he truly was. I got a call at home. I said I was Robert Crawford. The caller said he was Ray Swanson, a city councilman and a friend of Mayor Connolly. He wanted to talk about what he called a misunderstanding involving me, my wife and the mayor from the night before. I found his choice of words concerning, especially given the situation with my wife and Mayor Connolly's affair. Ray said he seemed to think there was no need for harsh language, suggesting that the situation involved just a late-night gathering between consenting adults who'd perhaps overindulged in drinks. He was optimistic that discussing the matter could resolve everything, but I rebutted, stating that Mayor Connolly had been involved in an affair with my wife for the past 6 months while I was deployed in Afghanistan. I'd caught them together the night before. Ray acknowledged the difficulty of the situation for me but hoped we could find a resolution that would be good for everyone. I replied, questioning who exactly he meant by everyone. I made it clear that my primary concern was for my daughter and that the concerns of others were of little importance to me. Ray expressed his concern, mentioning the mayor's influence in the community. I asked if he was threatening me. He said he was just pointing out the reality of the situation and that he didn't want to see me or my loved ones get hurt. I warned him to listen carefully. I told him about my experiences dealing with the Taliban over the past 6 months. I told him I wouldn't back down from a fight with someone like Mayor Connolly, who I called dishonorable and involved in stealing another man's wife. I said neither Ray nor the mayor had faced an opponent like me before. I told Councilman Swanson I wasn't bothered by his power and warned him about challenging me. I mentioned that my soon-to-be ex-my wife didn't tell the mayor about the consequences of getting involved with me. I also pointed out that I had a lot of support from former military personnel within a 100 m radius. I told Councilman Swanson to stay away from Mayor Connolly to avoid getting caught up in this. I told him the consequences of his actions and hinted at what was to come for the mayor. Ree tried to negotiate with me, suggesting that a substantial sum of money could resolve the situation. However, I dismissed his proposal, expressing my intense anger towards Donald Connolly for exploiting a soldier's wife while I was deployed. I said that no amount of money could alleviate the pain caused to my daughter and me. I told him that the only way I would consider a resolution was if Connolly and my wife experienced the same pain they had caused us. I gave Ree the message to pass on to both of them. Ree said he was concerned about the potential fallout and wanted to find a way to mitigate the consequences. I responded by. I told him what I thought needed to be done to resolve the situation, including Connolly admitting to the affair and resigning as mayor. I made it clear that I wasn't going to back down until I'd exposed him and got my own back. Ray seemed surprised at how serious I was. I told him I was going to get ready for dinner with my daughter, Stacy. I got a call from the garage. Ree told me that she'd put her mom's stuff out by the curb. Someone in a black Mercedes picked it up. Ree joked that the clothes might end up at Goodwill if the right person didn't collect them. I said I'd packed Stacy's regular clothes, but I wasn't sure about her fancy nightgowns. I told Stacy I wasn't comfortable with some of the things Teddy had said. She nodded and said she'd talk to her when she was ready. The weekend went by without anything happening. Stacy helped me with the laundry while I worked on my. On Monday morning, I'm planning to expose Mayor Connolly. I spoke with a contact at the local paper, John Foster, and we arranged to meet for coffee at Danny's. John, who used to be a sergeant in my National Guard company, greeted me warmly. I gave John some information about Mayor Connolly's affair with the wife of one of our soldiers during our deployment in Afghanistan. I didn't mention the soldier's name, because I knew it was a sensitive issue. I told John that if I were in the soldier's position, I wouldn't want it to become public knowledge. I also told him about the way Connell was interacting with the soldier's wife. I said I'd let him decide what to do next. I told John that, contrary to what people were saying, the woman wasn't separated or going through a divorce. I told John that the woman wasn't separated or going through a divorce. Her husband only recently found out about the affair. I was happy to answer John's questions about the affair. I showed him the pictures and videos I'd taken, but I asked that the woman's identity be partially obscured. I showed John the pictures and videos I'd captured, and he understood the implications and seemed a bit uneasy. I told him I was prepared to confront the shame, even though I knew the truth would eventually surface. I explained that I was away on business when I found out about Connell's affair with my wife. I told John that it was wrong to take advantage of a soldier's absence by engaging in an affair. John, who understood the seriousness of the situation, offered to look into it further after confirming that the affair had continued throughout my deployment. I transferred the evidence to his cell phone and we chatted briefly about fallen comrades from our company before parting ways with a handshake. I then proceeded with the next step, which involves, after looking online for a good divorce lawyer, I chose R.J. Collins ESQ and made an appointment for that afternoon. When I got to the office, I was surprised to find that R.J. stood for Revenge Joy, a woman in her 50s with a straightforward demeanor. She didn't waste any time asking how she could help me. I told her I needed a divorce. I told her up front that it wouldn't be an amicable split because my wife had been unfaithful during my deployment. She was surprised and dropped the pen she was holding. I confirmed with joy that the mayor in question was Connolly and gave her the full lowdown on what had happened. She listened intently for the next half hour. She took notes throughout, stopping now and then to ask questions or get more details when I mentioned my daughter, Stacy. I told her that Stacy was really upset and didn't want to stay with her mom during my deployment, given her age and preferences. Joy said there might be a way around that, suggesting I have Stacy stay with my mother instead. I told her I'd speak to my mother and get back to her. We talked for nearly an hour. I told her about our finances and she said I should talk to my wife about how to sort things out. I said that seeing how close my wife was to the mayor meant there was no way we could reconcile, and I asked her to. Kathy got in touch 5 times over the following week, but I kept the conversations brief, saying I'd give her an update on the proceedings later on Friday. Joy told me the divorce papers were ready and needed my details for serving them. I told Joy I was going to invite Kathy to my home the following Monday at 2. While Stacy was at school, I called Kathy to arrange to meet her on Monday at 2 p.m. at my house. Kathy tried to start a conversation, but I cut her off, saying she'd have a chance to speak later. She arrived a few minutes early and we sat down at the kitchen table. Despite the circumstances, I felt a pang of emotion seeing her. She looked beautiful, so I offered her coffee, but she only wanted water. I respected her wishes. I told her I'd let her speak, but I also said someone would be there soon to serve her with the divorce papers. She looked really pale. I told her I didn't want this either, just like I didn't want her affair with Donald. I said it seemed like neither of us was going to get what we wanted. Kathy begged me to listen to her, saying she had something to say. I said I'd hear her out. She told me how she'd worked on Donald's election campaign and how they'd become friends. During my deployment, she was feeling lonely and depressed, and she found solace in Donald's companionship. Kathy recalled attending a dinner event with Donald where he advised her to use her maiden name and leave her wedding rings at home to avoid gossip. She admitted that she hadn't thought much of it at the time, but she realized later that removing her rings was a mistake. Kathy recounted that she mingled with numerous people, all of whom perceived her as a single woman. When I inquired about when the affair began, Kathy admitted that it didn't start immediately. After a night of dancing and a kiss goodnight, when Donald dropped her off, she explained her actions by saying she was lonely and liked being treated like royalty by someone important in the community. I asked Kathy why she did this while I was away at war. She said she was wrong and that she missed me, even though I wasn't there. She kept seeing Donald. Kathy said that the company helped to take her mind off her loneliness. She told me that they were seeing each other more and more often, and that they had got quite close. Kathy said that they were seeing each other 2 or 3 times a week. One evening after a romantic dinner, Donald invited her back to his place. Kathy said that she felt a bit guilty at first, but she went with him anyway. Afterwards, she told Donald to take her home. She'd ended things with him and told him she loved me. She said she'd thought about it and changed her mind. Donald had left her alone for a while before reaching out. He said he missed her and wanted to see her again, but only as friends. He apologized for what had happened and promised not to put her in a compromising position. Despite her initial resolve, Kathy confessed that she agreed to see Donald again the following weekend. Kathy recounted that Donald took her to a party at a friend's home on the Bluffs. She described it as a small gathering with only 5 or 6 couples, all of whom were influential individuals in the town. Kathy was caught off guard when the wife of a prominent doctor inquired about how she managed to capture Donald's attention. Kathy was at a loss for words. She couldn't think of a suitable response. So, she admitted to fabricating a story about being separated from her husband and going through a divorce. The news about Kathy's fabricated separation and impending divorce quickly spread throughout the small town. This made Kathy feel trapped during a weekend when her daughter Stacy was away. Kathy spent time with Donald at his home. This led to their ongoing relationship. Kathy expressed deep regret. She also regretted the pain she caused me and Stacy. She acknowledged that her actions were the worst mistake of her life. She said that she wished she could undo them. However, she admitted that undoing the damage was impossible. She said she was sorry for the pain she'd caused me and Stacy. She said her actions were the worst mistake of her life and that she wished she could undo them. She said it was impossible to undo the damage. When I asked her about her feelings for Donald, she said she wasn't sure if she loved him, but that she enjoyed their time together, despite my questions about how close they were and the possibility of marriage. She stayed. We were both unsure about the future of our relationship when the doorbell rang. I suggested it might be for Kathy, so she approached the door slowly and confirmed her identity when handed a manila envelope which contained divorce papers. Kathy stood at the door for a while, visibly upset, before closing it and turning to me. She asked if our relationship was truly over, to which I affirmed, despite her declaration of love. I told her that what she loved was the life we had, which she had thrown away. I said that our daughter Stacy would stay with my mother until my deployment ended. Kathy broke down in tears, overwhelmed with regret. The next day, the front page of the local newspaper showed a photo with a headline about a married woman leaving a hotel room with Mayor Connolly. The photo showed Kathy and the mayor kissing as they left room 11. The article also mentioned some unverified rumors of regular meetings over the past 6 months between the woman and the mayor. It was accompanied by a caption questioning whether her husband serving in Afghanistan was aware of the situation. The article described the charity event attended by the pair and hotel records confirming the mayor's reservation of the room for the night. Additionally, the couple was photographed leaving the room at 2 in the morning. The mayor said that while her husband was away on deployment in Afghanistan, the newspaper was within its rights to report the story. The mayor's office was quick to enter damage control, saying that the story was entirely fabricated and that the mayor would never jeopardize any marriage. This was especially the case with a soldier serving his country. They also said that the photograph was an obvious fake and that unnamed individuals were targeting the mayor. A press conference was promised for later that afternoon to set the record straight. Fortunately, over the past 6 months, too many people had seen Connolly and Kathy together displaying affection in public. One by one, his friends and supporters began to distance themselves. Some people even called the newspaper to say that they knew the couple were having an affair because they'd seen them together on more than one occasion. They were shocked to find out that the woman's husband was away on army duty at the time of the affair. Mayor Connolly held his news conference, but none of his colleagues on the city council supported him. In fact, he had the support of his staff, but even half of them were missing. The newspaper and TV stations were there, recording the event. Connolly said he was shocked at the accusation. He said he and the woman were just acquaintances and had never done anything wrong. He also said it was wrong to bring shame on them or the woman's husband. Kathy pushed her way through the crowd and spoke up. Kathy reached the microphone and revealed her identity. She said, "My name is Kathy Crawford. I'm the wife of Army Major Robert Crawford. For the past 6 months, I've been having an affair with Mayor Connolly." Connolly tried to dismiss her, saying he didn't know her and calling her a liar. Kathy confronted him, expressing shame and heartbreak. She accused him of pursuing her despite knowing she was married and her husband. She was in Afghanistan, and she apologized to her husband through the TV cameras. Then she left while reporters asked the mayor questions. He turned and stormed back into City Hall. I have to say that sharing all of that with the world hurt my ego, but I knew the risks when I spoke to John Foster, my newspaper contact, the next day. This was when the city council president announced. The mayor resigned and said that the council would run the city until a new mayoral election could be held. I should have been happy, but I felt empty and lonely. I missed my wife more than I thought possible. That afternoon, my reporter friend called to say that Connolly had left town without leaving an address. My wife didn't come with me during the last few days of my leave. I spent as much time as I could with my daughter. I let Kathy move back in with me. Stacy and I went to my mom's house, which was 60 miles away. I enrolled her in school, promising to come and get her as soon as my deployment was over. The following week, I was on a plane back to Afghanistan. I was filled with burning anger that I intended to unleash on the enemy lurking in the desert. What happened to Kathy? A few weeks later, she moved in with Connolly and they left town. Did Robert return from Afghanistan? Yes, but he suffered critical injuries and his daughter helped him recover. He lost one of his legs in an ambush. Currently, he works as a design specialist for a large electronics firm and lives with his daughter. He sometimes talks about the challenges faced by soldiers who have served outside the